there anymore. He was sent back to say that we were safely under control.
Even if you make it,
Anyway,
even
this
if you make
Captain
it clear
Campbell
that
took
you're
us
not
down
going to
to
get
a
them a
hole.
ticket either way,
The mouth of the hole was a bit of old earthenware
police
pipe.
officers listening.
And if a man had pulled it out, the opening would have fallen in and showed no trace of
People
the
get
run.
pulled over.
And there he handed us over to another captain, because he had to go back above ground for the rest of
Even
his
if you
spell of
give them
duty.
a ticket and
We were
then
taken
meet
to a
them
big
later on at their house,
told to make ourselves
also
at
got
home.
in trouble for that.
There were other
They only
rabbits
agreed with them. She gave them the
and it was
ticket
by
and they thought
listening
they
to
were
them
gonna
and
get out.
asking
Even if you
questions
never say
that I learned
anything at
most
all
of what I've
about
been telling
them
you.
getting out.
We got talking to some of the dogs, and I made friends with one called Ivan's place. I told her about our problems here and why we'd come. And then she told us about it. When she finished, I said, it sounds terrible. Has it always been like this? She said, no. Our mother had told her that in years gone by, the warrant had been elsewhere and not small. But when
Yeah,
General
it was pretty
came,
low.
he had made them move to
Some of
Everett.
my ECU
Then he'd
professors
worked
talked
out this
about,
whole system
going up this way and going through Ashford.
perfected
Like,
it.
I'll
The
figure
rabbits
out
in Ephrata
my
were as
entire
safe as
drive
stars
is
in
not
the
going
sky.
through Ashford. And then they start
Most
talking about, I
rabbits here
guess, what
die of
does
old
that say
age,
about me, though?
unless the
I'd
outlet
rather reroute my drive than
But the trouble is, there are more rabbits now than the warrant can hold. Any fresh digging that's allowed has to be done under Asler supervision. And they do it terribly slowly and carefully. It all has to be hidden. We're overcrowded, and a lot of rabbits don't get above ground as much as they need. And for some reason, there are not enough bugs and too many dogs. A lot of us have found we can't produce litter because of the overcrowding. But no one is ever allowed to.
he was being threatened.
Only a few days ago,
But
several
if
of
his
us
word
went to the
against their
council
word,
and asked whether we could
yeah,
form an
that kind of
expedition to
thing.
start a new warrant somewhere else.
Why would
We
I
said we'd go
threaten
far,
him if
far
he
away,
never
as
bothered
far
with
away
me?
as they might. But they wouldn't hear us, not on any of it. Things can't go on like this. The system's
He's still
breaking
going to
down,
try to push for
but it
something,
doesn't do
but
to be
then
heard talking.
they were gone to court and then
This sounds
something had been mentioned about all the
Surely
things
they
that
won't
he was
object to
doing.
our proposal.
That's
We only want to
where
take
he
the food
screwed
loads
himself.
and no bugs. They've got
Giving
more
people
does than there's
leverage
room
over
for,
him.
and we want to take them further away than anyone here can ever have been. A little later, another
Probably why he was always doing
said we
that
were
with
to come
people
with him to the
passing through,
council.
because everyone in town knew
The
already
council
if he
meeting
ever
kind
gave
of
them a
big
ticket. Then
It's long
everything
and
would
rather
be
narrow, not as good as this honeycomb about us, because they've got no tree roots to make a wide road. We had to wait outside while they were talking about all sorts of other things. We were just one piece of daily council business. Strangers apprehended. There was another rabbit waiting, and he was under special government. Asler, they called him, the council police. I've never been near anyone so frightened in my life. I thought he'd go mad with me.
I know that
I
Ross
asked
used to
one of
have
these
his own
Asler what was
police
the matter,
department there for
and he said that this rabbit,
I don't know what
had
really
been
happens
caught
with
trying
them
to
is
run
that
away from
sometimes
the warrant.
funding dries up.
Well, they took him
But
inside,
nowadays,
and
they
first
don't.
of all we heard the poor fellow trying to
Hey, that's just
explain
about the
himself,
only place in
and then he was
Pontotoc County that
crying,
has their own
begging for mercy.
police
And when he came out,
department.
they'd ripped both his
Everywhere
ears
else
to
is
shreds,
covered by the
worse than this one of mine. We were all sniffing him, absolutely horrified. But one of the Asler said, you needn't make such a fuss, he's lucky to be alive. So while we were chewing on that, someone came out and said the council were ready for us. As soon as we got in, we were put up in front of this general room, and he really is a grim customer. I don't think even you
We
match
have
up
a
with him.
higher call volume than
He's almost as big as a hare, and there's something about his mere presence that frightens me, as if blood, fighting and killing were all just part of the
their
day's work.
headquarters is activated.
I thought he'd begin by asking us some questions about who we were and what we wanted, but he didn't do anything.
Counties that are in the
He
nation,
said,
they got evidence.
I'm going to explain the rules of the warrant and the conditions on which you'll live here. You must listen carefully, because the rules are to be kept, and any breaking of them will be punished. So then I spoke up at once, and said that there was a misunderstanding. We were an embassy, I said, come from another warrant to ask for Ephrata's goodwill and help. And I went on to explain that all we wanted was their agreement to our persuading a few dogs to come back. When I'd finished, General Woundwort said that it was out of the question, there was nothing to discuss. I replied that we'd like to stay with them for a day or two and try to persuade them to change their minds. Oh yes, he said, you'll stay. But there'll be no further occasion for you to take up the council's time, for the next few days at any rate. I said that seems very hard. Our request was surely a reasonable one. And I was just going to ask them to consider one or two things from our point of view, when another of the councillors, a very old rabbit, said, you seem to think you're here to argue with us and drive a bargain, but we're the ones to say what you're going to do. that they should remember that we were representing another world, even if it was small and there. We thought of ourselves as their guests. And it was only when I said that I realized with a horrible shock that they thought of us as their prisoners, or as good as prisoners, whatever they mean. Well, I'd rather say no more about the end of that meeting. Strawberry tried all he could to help me. He spoke very well about the decency and comradeship natural to animals. Animals don't behave like men, he said. If they have to fight, they fight. And if they have to kill, they kill. But they don't sit down and set their wits to work to devise ways of spoiling other creatures' lives and hurting them. They have dignity, animality. But it was all no use. At last, we fell silent, and General Woundward said, "The Council can't spare any more time for you now, and I shall have to leave it to your mark captain to tell you the rules. You'll join the right flank mark under Captain Bufos. Later, we shall see you again, and you'll find us perfectly friendly and helpful,